Hi my quilting friends, Leah Day here with a new video for the Machine Quilting Block Party. Today we're quilting our third block, the Sun Star, with many beautiful designs. And a new thing I'm trying is mini thread colors. I'm using both white and pumpkin colored thread. So let's get on the machine and see how this is going to work in free motion. So here's our Sun Star block, and I've been taking a look at this block and trying to figure out how I can use two different colors of thread on the surface. And the easiest way that I found was to maybe use white thread over the orange areas, and then to use orange thread into all of the other sections, because the orange thread will show up nicely everywhere except for the orange fabrics. So when I took a look at this, I really wanted to minimize the amount of travel stitching and stitching in the ditch that I have to do in two colors of thread. I don't want to have to go in there with white and then go in there again with pumpkin with my orange thread color. So what I decided to do was just knock out these straight lines in the orange sections. And if I start in the center and run my finger through it, then I can keep returning to the center and then just bounce into the next area. So all I'm going to do is knock out the lines in these sections. I'm not going to stitch in the ditch. I'm not going to do anything like that. I'll end up doing all of that with my orange thread instead. And by doing it this way, it's very quick. I stitch this section in white, switch thread colors, and I'll do the whole rest of the block in orange. So I've pulled up thread right in the center, and I've already knocked out one set of lines. And it's very, very simple quilting. The only tricky part is right when you're in the center. There's a lot of seam allowances right there, so just be careful getting started and push gently but firmly out of that area. It might just feel a little kind of dense underneath your foot, and that might hang up your foot a little bit and stop you from being able to move it smoothly. It's really easy to go over seam allowances and have it kind of bind up your foot a little bit and then jerk and get a big stitch. So watch out for that. So now I'm going to come down to this bottom tip, and again, this could be an area of seam allowance. And so one kind of get out of jail free card is to not even stitch exactly to that point where it comes to a point in the triangle. You don't have to stitch all the way to it. You could stitch right up to it, maybe get one stitch away, rotate around, and stitch back out of the area. Just watch out for areas like that, especially where these half square triangles are coming together, their points are coming together. You're gonna have a lot of seam allowances in those areas. Now you may notice that I'm changing directions a lot. I'm rotating my block around a lot. My machine for some reason skipping stitches today. I've noticed that. I think it might be the needle I'm using. Every once in a while I'll change to a needle, and even though it's a new needle, the machine doesn't seem to like it all that much. And so I'm kind of helping to prevent that by stitching straight forward. And then as soon as I get done with this section, I'm going to change needles again. So hopefully this little issue will stop happening. So I finished up all of the orange section quilting with white thread, and now I broke thread, and I have started in the center and just stitched in the ditch around those orange points. So again, this was kind of a flow. Just stitching right around, bouncing in, bouncing out. And then I've gotten back around here, and I'm going to start knocking out these yellow sections. What we're quilting in here is kind of rows of arch shapes, kind of forms a circle in the center, and then some wiggly flowing lines. And I have marked this with my ceramic marking pencil, but it is a bit faint, so I'm just having to be really careful as I'm quilting through this. And I did change my needle, so I can already tell that I'm having less skipping stitches issues there. That's one of those things. You ever notice anything like that? Stop and change your needle, change your thread, whatever it is that's causing you some problems. Okay, so this is just a series of small steps. Small bit of travel stitching in the ditch, and then just a little quilting across that arch shape, and then again a little bit more ditching. Now you may be wondering, why am I continuing to rotate my block so much even after I fixed my skipping stitches issue by changing my needle? Well, I find that maintaining good control and being able to stay right in the ditch or stitch right on these lines Really helps to have the block facing you. Even if that means that I have to do a little bit more rotation, that's okay. It's really not taking more time or more complicated to sit here and just rotate this little block around. So on your last row of echoing, you're going to start branching out and stitching these long wiggly lines. And there's a lot of different ways that you could knock these out. You could just stitch up and maybe travel stitch in the ditch. But I really like stitching out and then traveling all the way back, because this adds a double layer of thread over that wiggly line, really draws attention to it, especially with the nice contrast we've got going on with this orange thread on yellow fabric. So I'm just going to travel stitch over and branch out with my wiggly line and then travel stitch right back along it. And even if this gets a little messy, it's still going to look good. I was playing around with that. Even if your travel stitching isn't exactly perfect, it's still going to give you this really beautiful sun, kind of blazing sun effect. But again, the best way to maintain control, kind of stay right on top of your stitches, is to be able to see what you're doing and have good control over the quilt. That comes from pushing it through the quilt just straight forward like this and being able to see what you're doing, even if that means rotating around a little bit more often. So I've knocked out all of these wiggly lines. You can see just how nicely they stand out with that double layer of stitching. And I'm over here, it'd take quite a bit to travel stitch in the ditch over here, but I've travel stitched over, I've only got this little bit, and it'll add one more layer of thread right across that top row. And I like that idea. You can go, remember, you can go in any direction that you want. You could even break thread if you wanted to. But I want to get out here so that way I can ditch around this yellow triangle. Remember, stitching in the ditch, it's just slow, careful stitching. And I want to try and get my needle to go right in the seam line between those different fabrics. Keeping my hands and having everything push straight through the machine can really help, but also developing a certain level of blindness. If you get wiggly wobbly and you wobble off the line, just ignore it. Keep on stitching. Trust me, it's not going to show up. You're not going to notice it later. So I stitched the ditch along this outer triangle, and I was planning on breaking thread here simply because I was concentrating so much on going to the next yellow diamond shape and quilting it. But I changed my mind. Once I got here, I realized, I've got two sides of this square, this area already ditched. I could go on ahead and fill it with the design that's going in it, and that is Echo Shell. So let's do that. So to quilt Echo Shell, we're going to start with a half or quarter circle shape. So I'm going to stitch out and quilt a little quarter circle. Now I'm going to travel stitch about a half of an inch away and swing around with an echo. Those are the rules of the design. You start with some sort of circular shape, travel stitch, and echo. And you can do this as many times as you like. You could fill up this whole area with one single echo shell shape that's just been echoed a whole lot of times. But I really like the look of it when it's really random and you've got echo shells coming in all different directions. So I'm going to go on ahead and start another one, little quarter circle shape, travel stitch down, and swing out. Now I think I'm going to form one right here between those two. And again, travel stitch. So in this situation, we're not travel stitching in the ditch, we're travel stitching along the edge of a previous echo shell shape. That's absolutely allowed, that's necessary for the design. Okay. You're going to have little weird areas, you just got to figure out how to fill them in the most logical way possible. In this case, I'm just going to come up with kind of a little edge of a circle shape, travel stitch over, and echo it. Okay, so that whole square is knocked out, and again, take a look at your block. What's the next area? Where can you go easily to quilt? And I'm right here, so I can go on ahead and knock out my straight line quilting too. even if you're not working exactly, the center first, we've pretty much got this block secured and stable with the stitching in the ditch, that it's a-okay to go on ahead and start knocking out other areas. I am going to go on ahead and ditch right across the top of this triangle, so that way I have that line already set up and established. Just careful ditching. And now I can start knocking out my straight lines. And this is echoing in a different form. It's straight line quilting, but it's still that same technique of spacing out your lines about 1/2 of an inch away. Because it's a straight line, you'll notice that I'm rotating a little bit more, so that way I can face the line and keep it nice and straight. So at this point, you want to take a look at your block and decide what you want to quilt next. You can basically watch and repeat the same set of steps we've done. That would be quilt a yellow section with the wiggly lines, quilt the corner section with the echo shell, and quilt a background section with the straight lines. And we could break thread here, pull up thread here, and do the same series of steps all the way around the block. Or you could knock out a little bit of your wiggly lines in the background in this border area, then hit the next closest thing, which would be some echo shell, and then a yellow section, and then a background section. As you can see, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. What I decided I felt like doing was just knocking out a little bit of my wiggly lines and then going straight back into a little bit more echo shell. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just wiggling from point to point. Just think of a wiggly line, hit that point, wiggle back. And we could keep wiggling this all the way down. I think what I'm going to do is go on ahead and knock out a little bit more echo shell. That feels like the right thing to do right now. Remember, half circle shape, travel stitch carefully, and echo around. No matter how you quilt it, block 3 is going to end up looking really beautiful, and I can't wait to see how you quilt it. Make sure to post your photos to the Machine Quilting Block Party Facebook group so I can see your beautiful Sunstar block. If you'd like to get started with this project and learn how to piece and machine quilt beautifully with me this year, definitely click here to pick up your block patterns at leahday.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our videos so you don't miss out on any of the cool videos coming out every single week. Until next time, let's go quilt.